My name is Mark Fitzsimmons, and as was mentioned, I'm going to be talking about something more than just our physical health as well. So I am going to be talking about mental health. So just a disclaimer here, this is really vulnerable for me to be standing up here in front of all of you and talking honestly about my own experience in this space. And as we can see, my blood sugar is currently 9.9, and it's been steadily increasing ever since I've gotten more and more nervous throughout the day. And so I don't know if anybody can relate to that. But because we will be talking about mental health, this might bring up some stuff for all of you. So I hope that if it does, please stick around. I'll be outside afterwards if anybody wants to have a chat about this, but there's also a room full of people that you can speak to as well, and I know that we've all shared some similar experiences with this. One thing I'd like to point out, now this is a bit of a cliche that whenever we hear anybody talk about mental health and suicide and struggles like burnout, that the news report goes and says you can contact Lifeline if you're ever in crisis. And now, this is more than just a cliche for me. I've used this service, and it was really helpful for me to get through to the next moment where I could start to make a bit better decisions for myself. So they're accessible through the phone number that's up there on the screen. You can also text them as well if you don't feel like talking on the phone to somebody, and also online through lifeline.org.au. So please use that service. They won't know about your diabetes, but sometimes that's okay, because maybe you don't need a diabetes advice in that moment. So this is not going to be just focused on doom and gloom, though, because the fact is that everybody in this room has a mental health. We have our own experiences, our own things that trigger different emotions within us, and everybody in this room also takes their own steps to be managing that as well. So I probably should introduce myself a bit first, but thank you, Leon, for the brief introduction there. So my name's Mark. I work as a senior human-centred designer for aged and healthcare services. So I'm really passionate, because of my own experiences, about trying to give a voice to people to be able to advocate for their own decisions in the healthcare that they receive. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that I've grown up with diabetes and living as a kid with diabetes, where a lot of decisions felt like they were being made for me throughout that process. So that's driven my career decisions as well as my own mental health journey as well. So let's flash back to 1990. And that's me at 7 years old. It was a couple of months before I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I was a skinny little kid, and I think I was probably already experiencing symptoms at this point. And as you can see, the thickest part of my leg there is my knee. So I was obviously losing weight at this point, and I was diagnosed at that age. But I don't really remember a lot of that, to be honest, apart from playing with Lego in the children's hospital and doing arts and crafts. But life went on after that point. I grew up. I made some really interesting hair choices, and I have travelled around the world as well. I've been privileged enough to be able to do a lot of travel throughout my life, and diabetes hadn't held me back. But it's because I wasn't really thinking about my diabetes through any of those photos. So I had spent a large majority of my life just ignoring my diabetes and pretending that it didn't exist. So I was so used to just saying things like, I'm fine, I'm just a normal person, I don't really think about it that much. And I used to be well known for saying, I've had it for so long that I just know what my blood glucose is doing. And the thing is that most of those things that I said were false. And I think I was saying those things so that people didn't worry about me, and so that I didn't feel like a burden on different people, and so that I just was craving to feel normal, I think. And so I managed it by denying my diabetes for a lot of the time. And I think that comes down to a lot of the shame. I think living with type 1 diabetes, we face a lot of external shame. So I think a lot of people don't understand this. Like, when somebody finds out you have diabetes, you kind of brace yourself, ready to justify how you didn't cause it yourself, or trying to explain it to people, because it's not well understood out there. So I think a lot of that external stuff, even the should you be eating this kind of question that I'm sure we've all faced over the years, it just leads to that sort of shame that we get from external. And I think in myself, a lot of that became internal. I started to hear my own voice saying to me, oh, you should be managing things better. You should be doing this. You shouldn't be eating that. You should. So whenever I start to hear the word should going on inside my head, I know that it's because I'm feeling some sort of shame. And for me, that I know to hear that now, when I hear should, I recognise shame. And by being able to name it, it doesn't become such a powerful thing now for me. So my A1C back then was a large score of shame. So any Game of Thrones fans here that might recognise that scene? So that's what my A1C score was back then. And I'm going to fast forward to 2018. So I'd been living with diabetes now for 20-something years, and that's what I looked like. So I was 76 kilos, which is 30 kilos less than what I weigh right now. I was off work on stress leave. I was drinking alcohol just as a way to escape, but under the guise of I'm just having fun. And I was just ignoring my diabetes. I hadn't been managing it at all well. I think I was literally in DKA about 4 or 5 times, but too proud to go to the hospital as well. So it was a really, really awful time for me. And it's so bizarre to look at that photo up there, because that guy would have never pictured that this guy would be standing here only a few years later and talking to a bunch of other type 1s in the room as well. So it's been a journey from there. So I found myself in the biggest burnout that I think I've ever been a part of. Now look, diabetes was only one component that was contributing to that, but it was a big thing. It was a source of such a huge amount of shame for me, where I was stuck in that thinking of I should know better than to do this. I should be doing better than I am. I got this off of the Breakthrough T1D website, and because I was like, what are the signs of type 1 burnout? Because I know what it felt like for me, but first they're not checking your blood glucose levels. So tick, yep. I didn't actually even own a blood glucose meter for a couple of years. I don't know what happened to it. Because I honestly believed that I just magically knew what my blood sugar was doing, which clearly I didn't. Stopping or reducing insulin injections. So this was a big thing for me. I'd had a few bad hypos when I was younger, and so I think I'd become really afraid of insulin. And so I'd often halve my insulin doses, thinking that I was doing a good thing to prevent myself from having a hypo. But all I was doing was then sitting high all the time. Not worrying about eating habits or exercise, so clearly from the state of that previous photo, I think that's pretty evident. And ignoring my diabetes most of the time, absolutely. I tried my best not to think about it and to hide from it whenever possible. So when I felt like I was drowning, I had to find some ways to access help, and I didn't know where to look for that help. So the first thing I had to do was to actually start being honest. And that was not just with others, but also with myself. I had to start to admit where I actually was and what was going on for me. And the good thing was that I still had quite a few good friends around me that I could speak to, but they were so used to hearing all of this stuff come out of my mouth. I'm fine, no need to worry about me, don't worry about it. That I had to go and throw all of that away and start to tell them the truth, that I'm not okay, that I've actually got no idea what I'm doing, and that I really needed some help. Thankfully, my friends were there for me. And whilst it was really hard to start saying those words, it was actually easier because they were already people that cared about me. So that became some pretty good practice for me. Now, my A1C at that point just felt like confusion. So at this point, I hadn't had an A1C test done in 10 years. So, yeah, you know, this is not going to be that inspiring story. So it had been 10 years without an A1C because I always felt like I was going to be judged by the person who was reading the result back to me. And that became a barrier for me to actually go and seek medical care as well. So the second thing that I had to do then was to seek some mental health supports. So the first thing, because I'd had some practice by speaking with friends, being honest with them, which helped me to be a lot more honest with myself about where I was at, meant that I had a bit of practice to be able to start talking to medical professionals about this as well. So I went to my GP and had a very frank conversation about how I wasn't managing my diabetes, and had to get really humble to be able to actually have that conversation. And luckily enough, he was able to set me up with a mental health care plan and give me referrals through to a couple of different psychologists. And the first thing when I was talking about psychologists was, well, they're never going to understand me or my diabetes. Because I always thought that nobody understands me or my diabetes. I am unique, and that I'm sick of having to educate everybody about what diabetes is. But at that point in my life, that was okay. But one little announcement here is, so I've been working with Melanie with Breakthrough T1D as well, who are coming up with an education program for mental health professionals around type 1 diabetes as well. So please put some questions into the chat about that, and we're happy to talk about it afterwards as well. So, because it is a barrier, it is a reason where you feel like you can't talk to people because then you have to waste your energy educating them. But at that time, I just needed somebody to take all that confusing stuff and through a conversation try to unravel it into things that I could better see and manage. And I found that there was just this big cloud of fear that was following me around. So it's kind of like I'd gotten used to always being walking around in the rain, but I never really thought to look up and find out what was causing that rain for me. So the main goal that I had then was that I had to learn to manage my mental health first. I'd been so busy in my own head saying all of those, I should be doing this, should be managing my diabetes, I should be testing my blood sugar, I should be doing more insulin, I should, all of that, that I never actually thought that I needed to manage my mental health first. And the thing that I learned was that if I'm not managing my mental health, I have absolutely no capacity to be able to manage my physical health. Because I'm so busy stuck in my head, I'm so busy stuck in shame. So I need to work on that stuff first so I can start to make better decisions for myself. So fast forward a year from there, and those two photos were actually taken in the same spot, just a year apart. And I love those two, the difference, the contrast in those two photos. It's like you can see how the physical appearance difference was representative of the difference in my mental state. So in that time, I was seeing a psychologist regularly throughout that time. I had not started managing my diabetes particularly well, but I was managing my mental health a lot better at this point. I had given up alcohol as well in here, so I removed the thing that I was using to hide from life. And I was back at work. Life was starting to go pretty good. So the third thing that I needed to do then, because I had a better baseline for my mental health, was I had the capacity to then start to look at my physical health. So the next area I needed to get some help was by finding a medical team to connect with. And I say that you connect with, not who I connect with, because that might be a different person. I've heard people up here today talking about how type 1 diabetes is like a fingerprint, everyone's is unique, and so is the type of medical professionals that you're going to connect with. So mine, I connected really well with a diabetes educator through St Vincent's in Sydney, and they actually asked me how I was and listened to what my response was. Not just ask me what my blood sugar is, not ask me what my HbA1c is, ask me how I was. And I was able to use that honesty that I'd been practicing to go and say, actually, I've been really struggling and I've got no clue what I'm doing. So after years of burying my head in the sand, trying to hide from that big cloud of fear that has been following me around, I set myself the goal to start making decisions from the data rather than from fear. I saw somebody on Reddit had posted this, and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. How am I going to do that? Let's make decisions from data rather than from fear. Because every dosage decision I had made up until that point was based on how scared am I of having a hypo? How scared am I of having a complication? So I needed to get better at learning how to use the data to make decisions. And I was privileged enough to, not have that. This is actually the first blood glucose monitor I ever got when I was a kid, the glucometer 2. You had that one as well, yeah? So my knowledge of diabetes was still stuck at when I got this this blood glucose meter when I was in the children's hospital at 7 years old. So whilst I'd upgraded the technology, I hadn't upgraded my knowledge of how to use that technology and how to manage my blood sugar as an adult. I learnt how to mix my insulin and eat the same amount of carbs at every meal so that it was predictable and easy for a child. But I'd grown up, I was like a 40-year-old, 30-year-old at this point. So I needed to upgrade not just the technology, but my own knowledge. I know we had a session just next door earlier on this, but I was lucky enough to enroll in the Daphne course. So for those that don't know, Daphne is the dose adjustment for normal eating course, and it was so wonderful. I was able to then spend a week with other type 1s learning how to manage my diabetes, because what I learnt was that once I understood the data, it wasn't scary anymore. It was less fear around the decision making as well. So through that education and knowledge, I was able to reduce some of that fear that I had as well. My A1C at this point was very exciting. I was like, I started to be able to see these measurable improvements. I wasn't as afraid of going to the doctors and talking to people. I was really proud and excited of how far I was coming as well. And life was going pretty good. I mean, it was during COVID, so, we all know how that was like. But I was working in quite a high-pressure job, and I felt very important doing that. And I was on a meeting from home, and I was running a big workshop. And then in about 3 seconds, I lost the vision in my left eye. And I don't know what you do in that situation. Like, do you call an ambulance? Like, I don't know. What do you do? Nobody gives you a rule book of what to do when that happens. So I was at home alone, and I'm like running this workshop online, and I just said, sorry everybody, just can I just put you on hold for a second? And then I'm Googling what to do when you lose the vision in your eye. And I didn't really come up with much apart from go to the hospital. So I caught an Uber through to the Sydney Eye Hospital, and that started me on the treatment of finding out that I had just had a hemorrhage in my eye from proliferative retinopathy. So looking at the difference there between those two eyes, all those big black clouds, I call them my dementors. They float around my vision still in that eye. This is after I've had some treatments. But at that time, I felt so alone once again. I felt like, oh my God, all of those fears of like not managing my diabetes, all of this is my fault, all of this, like all of that stress. But I went through all of the various treatments. I really love this photo that I've got on the screen at the moment because you can see the difference in the pupil size there. The biggest challenge that I had with getting the retinopathy was that nobody else could see what I could see. So from the outside, I look like a perfectly visioned person that has nothing wrong with them. There was no way for me to be able to tell people what it was like and what I could see. The fact that whenever I look around this room, I see all this black stuff swirling around as well. Like, nobody can see that from the outside. So this was after I had some laser treatments, and it was actually visible in that photo. So I did a lot of treatments from laser to intraocular injections, and it sounds like something out of a horror movie because it kind of is. Like, the thing that I learnt through all of that is that fear is a perfectly normal feeling to feel, especially when you're in a scary situation. I think I'd been trying to make sure that I didn't feel too afraid of things because I knew that fear didn't lead to good decisions for me. But I learnt through this that it was actually okay for me to feel that fear, thank you, and to tell people about that, to talk about it, to allow myself the space to be able to feel that terrifying fear as well. So I had my rules that I'd already been using of being honest, telling people that I'm not okay, of putting my mental health first, of making the decisions from the data and not the fear. But then I was a little bit overloaded with trying to make sure I had perfect diabetes, perfect numbers, so that my eyes didn't get worse. And I could tell that I was starting to approach those same feelings of burnout with all that pressure on myself as well. So the next thing that I needed to do was to learn to trust the technology more. So at that point, I was on CGM, but still using MDI. I was managing all of those other 42 factors, as well as the stress of having these complications as well. And all of the calculation stuff was happening inside of my head. And I knew at that point that I needed to find ways to ease that burden on my mental capacity. So this is not an ad for any particular pump, but I swapped over onto an Ipso pump at that time, and once they'd implemented their CAM APS system, I was able to then learn to trust that technology so that it could start to make some of the decisions. Now, it doesn't remove me having to do calculations and all of that, and so don't expect the technology to solve all of those problems, but geez, it helps to ease that burden. It took away some of the pressure, which was enough to let me deal with the other chaos that was going on in my life with the complications and work and all of those other challenges that we all have by learning to trust that technology. It's not perfect. The thing is, neither am I. So I've made bad decisions around my diabetes and my dosing and all of that sort of stuff, and that's okay. And I need to recognise that the technology is also going to do the same thing. It won't be perfect, nor am I. But to be honest, I really welcome our new robot overlords because the benefit to me is immense. So much less decisions, and I heard some other speakers up here today saying it makes 80% less decisions for them. I don't know if I'd call it that percentage, but it's a lot. So what's life like now? So I still make mental health my priority. I have clear central vision, so I can see all of your lovely faces out here now. I've still got the Dementors flying around the top section, but that's okay. I'm used to them now. I still feel afraid. Like, blood sugar's still going up as I'm up here nervously talking to you all. I still feel afraid, but that's okay. Because I also feel supported. It's so amazing to actually say this and to look around the room and see people nodding as I'm saying different things as well, because I realise that there are other people that have actually either experienced the same thing or have felt in similar ways. So I don't feel as alone with it anymore. These photos are actually from last year when I did a motorbike trip through Vietnam, and I just like seeing them on the big screen, so hence why they're up there. My A1C now feels like contentment. It's not perfect, but that's not my goal anymore. But I feel at peace with it, and I see my A1C now as a tool to help me make different decisions or to learn from now. It doesn't feel like the pressure to perform. It feels like a tool that I can use to help me along the journey. So my feelings towards this blood test have changed over the years, and that's as it's gone up and down over the years as well. The last area that I didn't realise I needed until I had it was to actually meet other T1Ds. So like I just said, looking out at all of your faces and seeing nods and smiles and all of this, last year I published a book, as was mentioned, for type 1 diabetic kids, and it was a real way for me to then connect with the community, and I didn't realise that that was missing in my life until I actually had built this community around me, and now I don't know how I actually lived without it. So shout out to a few different social media platforms on here. I found Reddit was a great place for asking questions and getting support in the various type 1 groups. Shout out to the Breakthrough T1D groups there. I've called out T1D Connect there. It's such a great place where you see the whole array of human emotions throughout there. There's sometimes somebody just on there having a rant, so that knowing that people will understand, but also there's people asking for help, and you can actually create that real sense of community and connection. I've met people today that I know through these groups as well, and I've never met face-to-face, and it's been so wonderful to meet the people face-to-face that I only know from online. And it's because of those connections that I'm now able to stand here in front of you, because I've been able to tell my story online and to various people as well, and so I'm so privileged to be able to stand here on the stage and tell you all about this. So I want to do a little activity for those of you in the room. Now, those of you that are at home, I'm going to post onto the T1D Connect page directly after here so that you can all connect as well. But for those of you in the room, I'd like everybody to just close their eyes. Look, this is a safe place. If I can talk about that and show that awful photo of me, then this is a safe place. So what I'd like you to do is if you've ever felt like the world doesn't understand you or your diabetes, just raise your hand. Now, keep those hands in the air, and if you've ever felt afraid of complications, put your hands in the air. keep those hands in the air as well. And if you've ever felt like people misunderstood you and you have to educate everybody about your diabetes, put your hand in the air. Now, I want you to open your eyes and look around the room, and every single person that has their hand in the air has something in common with you right now. So I really encourage those of you that are in the room to go and say hi to a stranger once you're outside of this room, because those amazing little brief connections that you have with other diabetics has helped me to feel like I'm more normal as well. So please come and say hi to me afterwards as well if you would like to ask any questions or just have a chat. Remember, you're not alone. Thanks.